Good morning, everyone. We wanted to say happy May and give you a little background on who we are as an organization. We're going to start doing this each month just to make sure we're all on the same page. And we're going to also try out doing a poll and see if we can get some engagement and learn more from you guys. But as a start, we are A.D.A.P.T, the Atherton Disaster and Preparedness Team. And we are a group of volunteers. As you can see here, we're not made up of any one single person. There's a bunch of people who are involved and smiling. That's at our drill from 2 years ago. And we are, you can go to the next page, in Atherton and work with the fire, have worked with the fire department and the police department to make sure that Atherton is divvied up in intentional ways and that there are volunteer leaders in almost every area. You can see here how the town is divided. Connect with us afterwards or go to our website. GetReadyAtherton.org to find out what area you live in and who your volunteer leader is, or if you want to volunteer. And yeah, you can keep going here. Just a few quick things. We do a lot of training. That's one of our main goals. Our job is not to protect you, but to arm you guys and you all to be as resilient and prepared as possible for a disaster. And Tom Pressing, along with others, have hosted and conducted so much different, training over the years, and we're trying to record it and collect it and keep it on our website and our resource library. We have handouts, we have lists, we have videos, everything, and it's only growing. And we work within the town. Like I said earlier, we have signs to mark where you should meet during or after a disaster strikes. We make sure that the town council is up to date on what we're doing and work in tandem in partnership with the police department. Founded in 1999. We're not member led, so anyone can join a meeting or listen in or volunteer. And we meet a lot of times throughout the month, but our community standard meeting is the first Saturday of each month. And real quick, this is our current board of volunteers. Of course, there's many more people who work with A.D.A.P.T and who are heavily involved. We just wanted to introduce ourselves all at once on the board members. So I'm Jeannie, we have Jerry, Rebecca, Tom Owen, Tom Pressing, and John Mosby. So good morning, everyone. And I think we're gonna get started. I'll pass it off to Rebecca.
Oops. Okay, so today's agenda, we're gonna hear some local updates. And then we have Tom Pressing, who's going to talk to us about what to do if first responders are unavailable and we want to get help to the people who need it in our neighborhood and give help where we can. And then we'll leave time at the end for a Q&A. So this is a real robust introduction to how our neighborhoods can be ready to support the people who need it. And it's really incredible information. So I'm glad you all are here. All right, now I'll pass it over to APD or Tom Pressing for updates.
Right. So good morning. Anytime during the presentation today, you can ask questions, raise your hand, or put questions in chat. I will stay over afterwards for as long as you wish to answer additional questions or give you information as you need it. Our APD updates today is that the flock program is being expanded. So if you wish to contribute to that expansion, go ahead and call APD Direct and they can give you the ways in which you can help expand the flock program, which is driver license identification and vehicle identification of vehicles passing through the community. This is in part in response to the some of the intrusions into people's homes. So it's a proactive program. Chief McCauley asked me to share with you that we will be having a national night out this year, which we did not have last year, on Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021. And this national event honors the police men and women who commit their lives to protecting our community and keeping us safe. We'll have more details to come. A.D.A.P.T will have a canopy and a booth at this event. So let us know if you wish to join us in celebrating Chief McCauley and his officers. Usually Engine 3 from Almondral shows up from the fire district. There's hot dogs and hamburgers. There's music. There's a number of booths, and the Atherton Police Department will be there in full force, so you get to talk to the officers directly. As some of you know, Commander Joe Wade retired, who was our liaison, and he was replaced by Sergeant Brian Robbins, who has moved to Texas. So we will have a new A.D.A.P.T liaison that the chief is currently recruiting, just to let you know. So that's the APD update. The Atherton COVID update, currently as of 10 o'clock last night, according to San Mateo County Health, we've had 203 COVID cases in the 16 months since we've been collecting data. That represents 2.9% of the population. The population currently, the 2021 population count is 7,055. That's about 13 cases per month across that 16 months. And in terms of the cases per month, it's 0.2% per month in terms of the population. So that's the COVID update. We've been very vigilant in the community, so our cases are relatively low. The May A.D.A.P.T Advanced Training for Area Coordinators and Response Leaders will take place on May 18th and May 27th at 6 p.m. That's our third Tuesday and fourth Thursday of the month. The topic will be disaster communications, presented by John Mosby, Tom Owen, and Frank Adams. And I'm pleased to inform you that the A.D.A.P.T Field Guide, the PG&E Hazard Response Field Guide, and this CERT Field Operations Guides, and thank you, Andres Acevedo of MPF-PD CERT for those, will be distributed for our A.D.A.P.T area leaders. So we are finally we've got the materials now, and we will be getting those out. As was mentioned earlier, on September 11th, 2021, we will conduct our 5th annual, although we missed one last year, Atherton Community Emergency Drill at Holbrook Palmer Park, the Pavilion, and in Felton Gables. So the Felton Gables HOA approved participating as they did in 2019. So we'll be using those neighborhoods as part of the drill. The event will simulate a major earthquake and allow you to practice your disaster response skill sets with Athertonians and other local resident responders. APD and Menlo Fire will join us to hone our capabilities and our resiliency. More details will be forthcoming in email starting June 1st. And we have planning for safe drill deployment within the green, yellow, and orange state and county COVID protocols.
What is the date again, Tom?
September 11th.
Thank you.
So it's the 20th anniversary of the
Yeah.
9/11. And we'll have probably a little ceremony as well. We're working on that too.
Thank you.
I would like to take this time too to thank all the members of the board, Chief McCauley, the area coordinators, and all of you who are in the meeting today, and those who couldn't make it, for keeping A.D.A.P.T as strong as it has been throughout these challenging times. It is a testament to the vitality of our Atherton response community and our neighboring area responders. So from my heart to yours, thank you very much. Rebecca, I think we want to do the poll. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okie doke. We're very fortunate. We're going to have at least one poll to start with anyway in each of our community meetings. So this is our first inaugural poll. That's redundant, I apologize.
This is just to test the waters and see just the engagement. We all know everyone is concerned about a lot of different disasters, but
I think what we'd like to suggest is if you could choose up to 3 that you're most concerned about, and then we'll show the results in 5 seconds. Looks like we got almost everybody participating. Anybody need more time? All right.
Let's give them just a little bit more time, Rebecca,
Okay.
because we have 42 participants and I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance.
Okay.
I think we have critical mass.
Yep.
All right. And I will share the results so you all can see.
I bet pandemic would not have been on there. 2020 didn't have.
Yeah. Oh, see, and this helps us out because it gives us a good indicator of where we want to make sure that you get critical information for yourself, and then as leaders for your neighborhood leadership in responding to these specific events. For example, canopy fire could happen as a result of an earthquake. A gas explosion could also. So again, we're taking your input and making sure it's inculcated into our presentations.
Inculcated.
Okay, doke. Rebecca, are you doing the intro?
I think it's on.
Or is it,
I think
or
we're
should
set for
I?
you to go.
I
Okay.
think we're good to go with you, Tom, if you're ready.
I am definitely ready.
We did the poll a little earlier, but that's okay. Now we have lots of information to go on.
Okay, doke. So welcome to our May training topic, which is called the next 5 hours. We're going to discuss and share ideas about what you do after you have secured your family and yourself in a disaster, which was the topic of last month's presentation called the first 3 hours. The next 5 hours plus the first 3 form the 8-hour foundation upon which your ongoing emergency response as a individual, family, and neighborhood are going to be able to be sustained across 3 to 7 days. So that is our goal today. We're going to show you how a rollout works at your EAP and give you some ideas to either develop an EAP plan if you don't have one, or to modify and make an EAP plan more effective in your community. As you know, in the first 3 hours, you're checking your personal health, you're assembling your family, you're organizing your family, you're setting up your family communications network, you're performing necessary family triage and first aid, you're performing your property reconnaissance, you're checking on your pets, you're moving your car to the edge of the driveway facing outward with your go bag, with your bug out bag, a fire extinguisher and boost oxygen in the car. You're checking on your immediate neighbors. As you know, the 3 neighbors across the street, the neighbors on either side, and the 3 neighbors behind you, if that's how your street layout is. You're preparing your backyard for a camp out for up to 7 days. And then after you have set up your home camp out, you're reporting to your EAP. If your home is compromised, then you're reporting to the EAP with the equipment you need to shelter at the EAP. Any questions about that, those steps that we covered last time? By the way, when you report to an EAP, you don't necessarily have to be a leader, but having this knowledge that we're sharing today allows you to be a participant in the active formation of a disaster response. So let's say a major earthquake happens, which is going to be our scenario today. What I'm offering you is based on my 19 years of experience reading after action reports and the number of drills that we've done throughout the community. As resident responders, you've chosen to make yourself aware of the necessary knowledge and skill sets to lead your Atherton area, neighborhood, block in a disaster. It is important as an active responder to know your strengths and weaknesses so you can be part of a team or form a team around you to enhance your strengths and bolster your weaknesses. When evaluating your participation or leadership style, remember it is a team that saves lives, minimizes injuries, and creates calm in chaos. Remember your response is a marathon and not a sprint. So when the adrenaline is running, quite often it's go, go, go. But disaster response, especially if it's major, is in fact a marathon. Remember to be flexible, adaptable, excuse the pun, multi-purpose, think ahead. Remember to observe first, orient yourself, decide what to do and act, and then observe again. Initially, when a disaster happens, you're calling 911 as you see things happening immediately in and around you or in your family, so that you get into the queue as quickly as possible. You are taking actions, again, to minimize the disaster effect upon you and your community. This scenario or presentation I'm offering you is what would happen if responders can't be there. And we know the responders won't be there because of the fact that they will have priorities that will supersede moving into the neighborhoods. And if you were to count all of the neighborhoods in our district, then you would realize that with 7 fire stations and approximately 11 apparatus, they're not going to get to the neighborhoods. They're going to be doing lots and lots and lots of firefighting, light search and rescue, life safety, responding to life safety issues. And so we have to be really prepared to take care of ourselves. Go ahead, next. So as we said, first and foremost, always take care of yourself first, take care of yourself, your family second, and then you go out and you work with your community members. After you have minimized the impact upon you and your family, you're grabbing your go bag. Now, go bag is different than a bug out bag. A bug out bag is your survival gear for up to 3 to 7 days, depending on how you got it set up. Your go bag is the CERT go bag that you have, and the A.D.A.P.T go bag that we augmented and provided area coordinators about 3 years ago. We probably want to renew that project as well. And it has your helmet in it, your vest in it, and a number of other tools. And you're evaluating your neighborhood situation as you're reporting to your EAP. Your EAP has a sign. That sign looks just like that on a post, or it does not. Some areas do not have EAPs. which means that you have to create an EAP. And that's very important to realize that you may not have an EAP, or like in Jerry Luger's situation, where he has a cache in his home, but his EAP is 2 blocks away. So you have to become familiar with how in advance you're going to set up your area operations. As you're reporting to your EAP, do not enter damaged homes. Report the status of neighbors as you get to the EAP, and initially you'll be calling 911. And you bring your A.D.A.P.T. CERT go bag with you. Next. So here's a map of all of the EAPs we currently have, and we're really pleased that we've done such a good job of placing EAPs in our area. We need more. So someone asked in a previous meeting, our America, it was Diana Hawkins, who's on the town council. Are these strategically located? To some degree they are, but mostly they're in front of the homes that we are able to get permission from the residents. Even though the EAP is on the Atherton town easement, we need permission from the homeowner to have an EAP in front of their homes. So if you wish to have an EAP in front of your house, please let us know so we can add an EAP to your area.
Have you guys seen these around town, or do you have any questions about what they are? Or also, if you have an idea of where more could be, especially in certain areas, I think areas 4 and 5, you can ping us in the chat and we'd be happy to connect. We have budget for these.
Yes, that's to follow up on Jeannie's point. The town of Atherton is in fact putting the EAPs up in their budget. So the EAP signage and the installation of that signage is part of the town budget. So let's take advantage of that, especially in those areas where you have a large amount of area or concentration of people, like in far west Atherton, which is on the other side of Alameda de las Pulgas. So again, talk to Jeannie or myself and we can direct you, explain to you what an EAP entails, why it's important to have one. If there's a disaster, it'd be kind of nice to have the people rallying around your house to provide safety for not only your neighborhood, but obviously for you. When you assemble at the EAP, the first person who arrives is called the incident commander, or the IC. In other words, they're the leader. The IC may or may not be CERT trained. We're hopefully that they are. We're encouraging all of you who wish to be in leadership roles to take the CERT basic class, because it gives you the fundamentals, the 6 modules of fundamentals of CERT leadership. However, there may not be a CERT there, so you're going to lead, and this is what this presentation is all about. The first thing you're going to do is the second person shows up becomes the scribe. It is important to start taking notes immediately. Note taking is critical. It's a pad, it's a pencil sharpener, and a pen. Keeping notes is very critical for ongoing tracking of events, making sure that things are happening and being able to follow up. And even more importantly, when first responders, professional first responders show up, that you can give a very in their term, it's called a sit rep. It's a situation report. Being able to give them a report of what's happening and having a scribe there is very, very important. Also, following on to that, the incident commander, the IC, is establishing the team. You can leave the next slide there, Rebecca, it's okay. And that team is going to include the IC, the scribe, a communication section, an operations section, a logistics section, and in operations, you're going to be doing reconnaissance and medical operations and rapid response team deployment. And in logistics, you're doing crowd control, security, the logistics itself, and sheltering. you set up your EAP. An EAP can be simply a canopy to start off with, a table and 2 chairs. As you begin to expand your capability, as you get more people and you get more resources, then as you can see there, you could have a couple of canopies. You could have more chairs, you could have cots, you could have whatever you need. Basically, though, you're going to need tables, chairs, canopies, scribing tools, and lighting at the outset. I do recommend, if you're purchasing canopies, the 10 by 10 canopy is a good size. You can get them on sale at Big Five or or online. And I do recommend trying to find canopies that are 3-sided, so it has three removable sidewalls. That'll come in handy for weather. Next.
Just to reorient and reiterate this point, what Tom is describing is the best case scenario where we have the supplies. What we'll be simulating in the drill in September to a degree, but like Tom was just saying, we don't have these supplies for every single area. So that's why we're suggesting and giving you tips on what to purchase ahead of time so we can aggregate our supplies together as a community at each of these signs if something were to end up happening. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Jeannie, for that reminder. So as Diana Hawkins also asked, well, where are we getting all this equipment? You're bringing it. You know, we do have 3 cache, what's called DRCs, disaster response cache trailers. There's one for the entire area of East Atherton, which is on the other on the east side of Middlefield. There's one DRC for Central Atherton, which is Middlefield to El Camino. There's one for West Atherton, which is El Camino to Alameda de las Pocas. And I'm pleased to announce that we have submitted for approval a purchase of a 4th DRC for what I'm calling Far West Atherton, for that area above Alameda de las Pocas. When you are organizing these operational capabilities, you're ending up dividing yourself into 3 distinct groups of activity. Communications, so that you stay in touch with each other within your EAP and around EAP, and eventually you get in touch with the town EOC, which is called an Emergency Operations Center. That's an acronym. In other words, the town has a centralized communications unit, and hopefully when we start getting information from the field, and we'll talk about that in a moment, then that comes to our communications section. They scribe it, they pass it to the leadership of the EAP so they can deploy assets and response. And then through ham radio, it goes up to the town EOC and then up to the Menlo Fire District OEM operations. And so that's generally the idea. The field operations will be by FRS radio or GMRS radio, and then communications upward will be through ham. You have a logistics unit that takes care of everything inside the EAP. So what would that be? Well, that would be signing people in, called volunteer management, making sure we get resources. So you're starting to collect resources and distribute them. You have what is called crowd traffic controls, because you're in the street. So you're making sure that the street is safe. You're helping volunteer management keep the flow of people from being congested. And then you have a security, which is maintaining the perimeter around your EAP. Your operations group, which consists of reconnaissance, rapid response teams, and the medical unit, those go outside of your EAP. And that person is literally focused on going out into the community, finding out what is not working well, coming back with the information, and then deploying the medical assets or the, let's say, light search and rescue assets, whatever they may be, to helping the community. In the meantime, into the situation, your logistics group is setting up sheltering for those folks displaced by the disaster and who cannot, in fact, stay in their homes or stay in their backyards. So what we talked about in the first 3 hours is setting up a backyard camp out. But what if you can't? So we have to have a sheltering capability. You have to think about that. And so you say, well, Tom, we don't have enough people. And I would say you're absolutely correct. So what you're doing is you're only applying your problem-solving skill set within the number of people you have. You don't stretch yourself any farther. So this is like an accordion. If you have a lot of people, you can expand your capability. If you don't, you keep your activity to a minimum. Getting back to the Scribe real quick, we can leave that slide up for a second. As far as communications go, that Scribe is very important to the IC because they're recording weather, household situations, injuries, damage, fire, toxic materials, and road obstructions. Likewise, the Scribe inside the communications unit is doing the same thing. So we have redundant scribing. So your communications unit is going to be made up of someone who's in charge of it. We'll call it the communications supervisor, a radio operator, someone who is net control, to use the buzzword, who is in fact picking up the traffic. You have a scribe who's writing everything down. And then you have runners. Now, you may not have enough people for runners, and that's the case, then you don't. But the reason why you want to have runners is because you want a backup. What happens if your radios go down or a radio goes down? Then you use runners to do your communication. And then when we get sufficient information and the link up can be made, then we are communicating with the town EOC. It could take up to 3 hours, maybe 4 hours before the town EOC becomes operational. So that communications supervisor leader is going to have to be periodically checking in with the town frequency to see if they're up. If not, you are communicating within the community. Okie doke. Now, after you're setting up communications, you're setting up logistics. And logistics consists, as I said, of volunteer management, which is checking people in and out because you want to keep track of those folks. So you maybe have 1 or 2 people doing that. Again, if you have the personnel, you may have to double up. You're setting up crowd traffic control to keep the street and your EAP safe in terms of not getting congested or creating injury situations within the EAP. You're creating a security team to secure that area. And then after you have begun to settle down and are responding to the conditions around you, then you're setting up your sheltering operations. Any questions so far?
You can always type them in the chat too for us to address
Right.
later on.
So if you saw that chart before, you have communications, you have logistics, and you have operations. And in one sense, they're happening all at the same time. Nothing really happens in terms of getting fully loaded, so to speak, until communications is really on board and all the FRS radios are working and there's communication with both verbal as well as radio within the EAP. No operations activity occurs until the communications unit is up because we never send anybody out into the field without radios. The first thing operations is going to do is set up reconnaissance. You want to know what's happening in your community. It's important because you may have to move your EAP if conditions require, depending on what if there's a canopy fire and the wind, it happens to be in the afternoon and the wind is blowing off the bay and bringing that fire to you. You may have to evacuate. Even though in an earthquake, it's going to be rather challenging. Or you may have a gas explosion, or you may have a plane crash. which affect things. So your reconnaissance team is going out and finding out what's going on in the neighborhood. That also sets up the degree to which you are going to respond to those issues. When you are going out into the neighborhood, you are looking for life hazard situations. And those life hazard situations are a gas leak, a multi-story collapse, structure fire, downed power lines, and auto accidents with victims or victims who appear to be immediate. Now, you don't have to be calling in other red, you can say red, yellow, and green to keep it simple, but you're calling those in immediately because those are life hazard. Those life hazard issues are going to be called up through 911, assuming 911 is up. And those life hazard situations are going to become prioritized by your operations group to go back out and resolve. All other issues in the field will then be written down. So your reconnaissance teams are always 3 people as a result of that. It's a leader with a radio, so the leader is the radio operator as well. You have a scribe, and then you have a spotter security. So you have 3 people. They're calling in directly those life hazard conditions, as I pointed out, gas leak, multi-story collapse, structure fire, down power lines, auto accident with injuries, and victims that need immediate assistance. They're recording everything else, everything that looks like it's a problem. And when they come back in from their reconnaissance, they're turning that into communications, who are then recording that activity. Next. Now that we have an idea of what's going on in the neighborhoods, now operations and its medical unit can start to be able to prepare to go help those individuals. The medical unit is made up of the medical supervisor, a scribe, a triage area, a medical operations area, and then a blue and black TARP operations. Blue TARP is for those individuals who you know because you cannot give them appropriate aid, and it's going to be several days, that are in a situation where they are not deceased yet, but may become deceased because their injuries are very severe. And black TARP operations are for those folks who are deceased. And those are the elements of a medical unit. So you want to get the gestalt of it. You may not have enough people to do all that, but understanding what you are going to have to deal with is very important. So the person who's in charge of your medical unit may be a doctor, they may not be, they may be an EMT, they may be a nurse, or they may be someone like you who's got first aid training. And I'm proud to let you know that we are working on an advanced first aid class to be offered by the town to the A.D.A.P.T community, and we'll have more information hopefully by our next meeting to give you some of that advanced first aid capability that you would need to run a medical unit, especially if you don't have a doctor. That medical unit supervisor is forming up what are called triage transport teams, made up of 6 people, always 6. They are going out to, in order, respond to the reconnaissance reports, that order being red for immediate help, very serious injury, delayed, well, we could wait a little bit, and then green, which is walking wounded. Those 6 people hopefully will have a stretcher of some kind or something adapted to a stretcher. And it's made up of the team leader, who's the radio operator as well. You have 2 medical personnel who are going to be helping with the medical situation, and then 3 support people, forming 6. We found out in the drills, interestingly enough, that you really do need 6 people to carry a middleweight individual from a location back to your EAP medical area. One of the things we also found out for those of you who have EAPs or looking to set one up, you want fixed pole stretchers. We found out that that blankets or those canvas stretchers that are pliable actually are dangerous to the responders, in that the 2 individuals or the individuals in the middle of the flexible stretcher are carrying most of the weight. So you have 2 people carrying most of the weight, and that's actually very, very dangerous because they could hurt their backs or their ankles or throw their neck out. So you want to be very careful about that. So teams of 6 are going out 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, depending on how many you have. I suspect it's going to be 1 by 1. And that medical leader is going to be prioritizing who you're sending out and responding to first. You're bringing them back, then you go back out for so let's say we have 2 individuals classified as red and 3 as yellow. So we take care of the 2 reds first, the 3 yellows second. The folks who are walking wounded, you gather them up as you are in the field, and you are bringing them back with you so that they don't stay in there. You never send a person who is medical status green by themselves, so they come back with you. You have a radio, so you are letting the medical supervisor know, or communications know, that you have arrived at that you're leaving, that you've arrived at the site, and that you have come back. And that's important. We want to keep communications very, 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 very tight in the field so that the units going out don't become an issue for you as well. Any questions up to that point about how you would coordinate from reconnaissance to medical triage transport? Now, in the meantime, over there in logistics, the logistics leader and his people or her people are in fact trying to collect up equipment, more canopies, maybe some tents, food, whatever. And they want to set up a sheltering area, and that sheltering area would be near the EAP, in other words, adjacent to it. And you always want to set up your sheltering area away from your medical area and from the frenetic activity within the EAP. That's where that crowd traffic control unit becomes important and security becomes important. Now, as you have begun retrieving folks who are injured, you also have communications, as we pointed out, of other issues like a multi-story collapse or down power lines or a vehicle accident with injuries. And that's going to require a rapid response team. In most cases, it'll be a light search and rescue team, which will consist of 6 people again, the leader who has the radio, 2 medical folks, and 3 folks who are going to be doing the light search and rescue aspect. In other words, the retrieval of the individual who is trapped. Again, a team of 6. Now, if it's a multi-person entrapment, then you would send 2 teams. And in that case, or you don't have enough for 2 teams, so you would send an 8-person team. So you have to be flexible in that regard, so not get stuck on the formula, which is typically 6 per person. But if you don't have enough folks and you have multiple family members trapped in a building, then you send an 8-person team. It might be a 7-person team, as many as you can. But they need to be under control of a single individual who is leading the activity at the site. They may be calling in for advice from, let's say, medical or operations to get some help. However, that individual who's, your team leader at the site is in fact, doing the yeoman's work of leadership. Now, there are other activities that are going to occur that are going to require rapid response, not just light search and rescue, which is entrapment. You may have fire suppression issues. Now, we're not asking you to knock down a major fire. We're only responding to those fire suppression issues where we catch the fire at a very early stage, and we can use the resources at hand at the property with hoses and water or fire extinguishers that you are bringing with you to knock down a fire before it starts or gets going. And you know why that we want to do that, why there is, in fact, as a matter of fact, it's a CERT module, fire suppression, because we want to prevent the potential of a canopy fire. So if we can get to small fires early and knock them down, contain them, and that's your fire suppression teams, then we prevent the potential of a canopy fire, especially if there's a high wind following an earthquake. Fire suppression teams are usually 3 people each. You have a leader and you have 2 fire suppression folks. The third fire suppression person is protecting the leader and the first fire suppression person. So you have plenty of protection. If it's a larger fire, then you would send out 2 teams. And if you can't send out 2 teams, then you send out 4 people. You know, maybe 3 people have fire extinguishers and you have your leader with the radio. So you're gonna have to be adaptive, excuse the pun again, but the bottom line is the ideal team is 3 and teams of 3 and teams of 6, but you can certainly modify them as you see fit. Another kind of rapid response team is search and recovery, and that's for lost folks. So it's possible that you could have, in an earthquake, you could have an elderly individual get disoriented and walk away from their property, and a report comes in from a neighbor or from the reconnaissance team that we have a lost individual or adult, senior, let's say, or a lost child. So you have those search and recovery teams. You'll need teams to go out and do debris clearing. Initially, debris clearing to maintain the EAP is clear, and then to make sure that the thoroughfare, the roadway in and out of your neighborhood is as clear as possible, so that in fact, first responders can get there. And then there'll be other situations as they arrive.
Hey,
yes.
Can you confirm with the group, can you tell everyone what a canopy fire is?
A canopy fire. So Atherton is very blessed to have tremendous a forest environment, tremendous, foliage. And a canopy fire is when a fire gets caught up in the foliage or in the forest cover called the canopy. And because of winds, usually in the afternoon coming off the bay, but it could certainly be in the morning as well, passes through the canopy and then down onto the buildings. So the fires up north were canopy fires. They were traveling at high rates of speed through the overgrowth. So that's why, we've had conversations about do the best you can of keeping your area on your property as clear as you can, trimming your trees. And we want to minimize that potential. What could cause a canopy fire? A little small fire that starts in a home that remains unattended. Power lines go down and you have arcing wires. And anything else that might create a spark, and you want to get to those right away. So, and if it gets up into the canopy, because we have so much beautiful forest environment in Atherton, we want to be able to prevent that from happening. Does that help, Jeannie?
Yes. And we do have another question from Dan.
Yes. Dan.
Dan, do you maybe want to elaborate, or do you want to wait till the end? Up to you.
Let's wait to the end.
Okay. Now, during this process, moving back again, the IC is watching everything. The IC does not rescue anyone, doesn't perform medical activities, isn't, setting up shelter operations. They're stepping back, and they're like the producer director. They're watching the flow. They have a scribe. Communications has a scribe. Medical operations has a scribe, and they're listening to the inputs, and they're making sure that there's a flow. They're allowing the communications and logistics and operations sections to do their work. So they're not micromanaging, they're being a field general. However, they're watching the flow, and if they see that there's a blockage, then they are conferring with the various roles of leadership and making sure that is unblocked. They're also responsible for making sure that there's a health and welfare check every hour. And what that means is everybody checks in via radio or via voice or by whistle or whatever it is, so that you don't lose people. One of the things that happens in drills, we even had it happen in our own drill, in the Atherton 4 drill, we actually lost somebody, and we actually had to create a 3-person search and recovery team to go find them. And they had wandered off and not checked in on their health and welfare check. So we found them and brought them back. That is to make sure you don't have folks wandering off, especially in a major event or an earthquake emergency. Traumatic stress can occur and people can get disoriented. They can go actually into a form of shock in which they lose their ability to track what's going on, and they may decide to go save somebody in the middle of a conscious shock situation. They've decided that somebody needs help. And so you're keeping track of everyone. That's why you have external security and you have your crowd traffic control on the internal, to make sure that you're keeping track of folks, because you don't want to create an additional injury situation or life hazard situation because people are wandering off. As I mentioned, a bunch of things are happening all at the same time. You got communications is happening, logistics is happening. You got operations is doing their rapid response. By this time, you've got medical operations, and now you have shelter operations. So what is going on with the shelter group? What are the things that, if you are going to set up a shelter, what are the things you have to think about if you're going to be the person who is in charge of the shelter? And that might be that's going to be the oversight of the IC. And you might have a large shelter or you might have a small shelter. So what's a small shelter? Well, a small shelter is canopies and the ability to house folks, to keep them out of the weather. So it's the sheltering aspect. Then there is the kitchen aspect. The kitchen is, how do you collect up food that may allow you to last longer than 3 days, and water, and how do you distribute it effectively? So you have that aspect. You then have your hygiene and sanitation aspect. So by literally, the person who's in charge of the shelter is not only looking at the actual quartering of people, but one of the immediate things is, where are you going to set up your outdoor bathrooms? Because hygiene and sanitation, the breakdown of that will create ongoing issues and create its own disease vector in and around day 3. So you want to be thinking about where you're going to put your outdoor restrooms, and how do you do that? And you have to be thinking about those things. There's obviously the shovel and toilet paper and some disinfectant, or there's the purchase of those outdoor sanitation units that you can get on Amazon. The next thing that's very, very important, and we've talked about this before in detail, is specialized care. In our community, we have moms and dads living with us. We have some of the folks living with us may be handicapped or handicapable, and we have children. So you want to think about how you're going to handle that on a family level in your backyard setup, but also on a group level at the EAP. In Felton Gables, when we did so Felton Gables had a Felton Gables drill. So they had a local neighborhood drill. We had 2 neighborhoods involved. And they decided to set up a child care unit. So the front of one house was where all the kids between, 2 years old and about 10 years old would all be taken care of in one area. There was an area for elder and handicap care, and then there was an area for pets. So they chose to do it that way. So there were 3 different houses where you had specialized care with individuals dedicated to maintaining that specialized care for children, for elderly or handicapable or handicapped, and then the pets. And then you have to be thinking about the unexpected. So what's the unexpected? Weather changes, influx of folks and that you don't expect maybe from other neighborhoods. You start taking a look at how much water and food you have and be thinking about rationing. So shelter operations, a matter of fact, I believe the fire district is taking a look at actually offering a shelter operations class. And I do know the Red Cross has one, and we may bring the Red Cross in to actually give us instruction on that. But those of you who would be interested in that shelter operations, those are the kinds of things you have to think about. Now, the nice thing is everything that I'm sharing with you is a checklist. We've created a master checklist, and those checklists and those job descriptions, we even have a job description for every function in the EAP, will be and are on our website, along with a layout for a EAP, plus the script for this presentation, plus the PowerPoint for this presentation. And the reason why we're making all of those resources available to you, there'll be some of them will be password protected, is so that you area, neighborhood, and block coordinators can take the Zoom or the PowerPoint or the checklist and give your own presentations. You could take the Zoom presentation that I'm giving today, review it, change it to fit your own block, change the time frame in which you're delivering it, change it to the delivery style so that those folks in your area can be brought up to speed. So we're making that available so that you don't necessarily have to rely on us all the time, although I'm certainly more than happy to come out and give an in-person presentation or a Zoom presentation to your block, your neighborhood, or your area. Next. Reminders for everyone, whether you're a leader or a participant: hydrate, eat, and rest. Hydration is something that always falls off because you're in the adrenaline state and you forget to hydrate. And in an adrenaline state, you in fact will be creating a situation that if you don't hydrate, you will put yourself in a situation of passing out. So hydration is very important. Your team leaders, section leaders, IC, it's important that you do hydration breaks. So in our drill, we actually stop the drill. We literally stop the drill as if it's a movie, and we stop it and everybody has to take a swig of water. Eating is very important. So those of you who have not only bug out bags, but you leaders of go bags, you should have some kind of nutrition in that to keep your blood sugar up. Because if the blood sugar tanks, your hand-eye coordination is not effective and your decision making will be diminished. And this is the tough one: rest. Now, your IC and all of your leadership in your EAP will decide what kind of shifts you want to have. You want to have 8-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, 24-hour shifts, however you want to organize it. The most important thing is once you set up a shift operations, stick by it, make sure that people come off the line, out of the field, no matter what. There are a lot of folks their adrenaline will be running and they want to stay out in the field beyond their shift, and that's commendable, but also dangerous. And you pull them off. And you tell them to go rest. To be honest with you, when you're in an adrenaline state, lying down and trying to go to sleep after a 12-hour intense shift is not going to happen. However, what will happen is you make sure that they're lying down and they're resting. They may not sleep, but getting them out of the flow of energy, out of the flow of activity, allows them to rejuvenate. And if they're hydrating and eating, however long your rest period is decided to be, or out of the field, then you're more likely to have a sustainable EAP operations. Again, blood sugar, exhaustion, and stress. So this is what's called disaster psychology. You start seeing that you have to tell people 2 or 3 times to do something. It's not because they're not capable, it's because they're starting to show hydration and blood sugar issues, or stress issues, or exhaustion. And everybody's stress level is different. If you see that someone is starting to go into stress disorder, then use your communication skill set and pull them out of the field so that they can, in one sense, heal themselves from the trauma that they're dealing with, rest and rejuvenate so they don't become a casualty of the event. The other thing is, because as active members of the community and leaders, you have taken care of your family. Maybe you've set up that backyard camp out, disaster camp out, and you've gone to work at the EAP. That means that at least every hour, your family radio net, you have an FRS radio, along with, as we discussed at our last meeting, you have your own family net, which is FRS radios, at least 2. So once an hour, they're calling you or you're calling them just to see how everybody is, because your family may stay in your backyard camp out area while you're operating the EAP, which is dealing with, group issues, which are group sheltering where people have been displaced, all of the rapid response issues, which are group issues, as well as the medical. Next. Next steps. Where's your EAP? If you don't have one, that's okay. If you don't have a sign, decide if you can get someone to have an EAP in your area. And if you don't have one, that's okay. Decide where you're going to have one impromptu in advance and how you're going to set it up. Again, an emergency situation is usually not the ideal situation. So if you're benefited by having an EAP location, fine. If you're not, know how to set one up. Print both the disaster response checklists, put copies with your emergency kits. So all of the checklists that we have, all of the scripts we have for either a family rollout or, let's say, EAP rollout, put, if you're making a binder, a disaster binder for your bug out bag, then put this in there so that you have a hard copy, so that, and you may have to make 2 or 3 copies of each of these so that you can pull them out and hand them to family members or other members of your team. To do all of this, you have to be prepared yourself, to be thinking about this in advance. Then inculcating, bringing together your family into a similar mindset. They don't have to have the same mind. Matter of fact, they probably won't have the same mindset that you do, but having them familiar with your personal resilience and preparation, having a plan, making sure you have supplies so that you can be sustained for 3 to 7 days, and making sure that you sign up for SMC alert. Now, there's a new application coming out that will be rolled out shortly called Zone Haven, which is another large-scale notification system to also complement SMC alert. Also, we in Atherton have the police flashcom that goes out that, so we have, as we're using the term doubly redundant, we have SMC alert, Zone Haven, and the police and APD Flashcom. So we have three ways of being communicated with, updated, and being able to know what's going on around us, a large scale intel, so to speak, to make decisions. For more
I just want to what SMC alert is, what all these terms are that Tom was just saying. For those of you that don't know, they're different on a high level. There are different ways that the town and important organizations can get a hold of us as residents, whether that's through text or on the phone or email. So that's why we're trying to get people to sign up, because if we can't disseminate our information, then it's not helpful to anyone. So, and it only will benefit you. There's no spam. It's just for the town to get a hold of you in different ways.
Thank you, Jeannie. Sometimes I forget that I need to be very specific about what some of these buzzwords mean. So Zone Haven is a new notification system that'll be coming out, I believe, sometime in and around the June area or so. That applies to all of San Mateo County. SMC Alert, which comes out of the San Mateo County Office of Emergency Management, is also a county-wide communication. And then we have our own Atherton PD flash communication. So anyone who comes into the community of Atherton signs up with the police department. It's part of the process of becoming an Athertonian, so that Chief McCauley and his leadership can give you the best available information quickly.
Yeah, hey Tom, I want to just footnote on what you and Gina are talking about relative to Zone Haven. That Zone Haven, so remember that name, it is coming, as Tom Pressing said. It's integrated with SMC alerts. So those things go hand in hand, and they'll use SMC as the distribution model. But Zone Haven is a platform looking at the capacity and the density in certain areas to plan for evacuations and whatnot. So it's very important that you register for SMC Alert, and you can do that now. There's good information that comes via that medium, and then once Zone Haven goes live, it'll be integrated in that. So look for those two things to come, but they're not, they work better together, let's put it that way.
Oh, thank you, Tom. That clarifies it for me too. So I wasn't aware of the mutual platforming of the two. So that's important for me to make sure that I'm aware of, and our community is too. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no worries. And there'll be more on SMC coming soon. We're doing a lot of work in the district and elsewhere with the police department to make sure that it's accurate. And then as Tom and I think Jeannie also said, it's not about spam. It's about getting folks aware of what's going on. In fact, there's a GPS component that if I'm a resident of one area and I'm visiting another area, that it may recognize my phone being in the other area and give me the alert relative to where I am. So lots of cool things on that platform. So look forward to that coming down the pipe.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Okay, at this point, I'd like to entertain questions from all of you who have them. Dan, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, sorry. I was just wondering if there was any old fire suppressing equipment in the trailers.
Oh,
Like
the trailer.
hoses. Sorry.
Okay. Let me explain about trailers. So Atherton has three. Atherton purchased, along with A.D.A.P.T, purchased three what are called DRC trailers. Okay, they're the Atherton trailers. The fire district has 7 trailers, for one for each of the fire departments. So there is a MPFPD DRC, and then there are that are distributed throughout the areas in the fire stations, although they're not strictly at the fire stations now. And then we have our own. And as I said, we've distributed the 3 of our own in the areas that I previously described. In our DRCs, we have a couple of fire extinguishers each. We are relying on you as the resident of Atherton to have the number of fire extinguishers or the fire suppression tools that you think is necessary for your residents. The doctors Warren did the research, and we have the information on the website on a really good pool pump and generator system that can use your allows you to use your pool as a reservoir for firefighting at your own home. It includes hoses and the pump and the generator and whatnot. And thank you to the doctors Warren for doing that for us. And then having fire extinguishers, but the fire suppression that we have in the trailers is fire extinguishers only.
And to reiterate what's in the chat, we want to make sure that no one is doing any fire suppression activities that is not 110% in the realm of possibility. We want to make sure we're not creating more victims, as Tom said. We want to make sure everyone's safe and that we're following, rules and guidelines and instructions from CERT and all of that on how to suppress a fire properly without injuring yourself first.
Yes, we are not firefighters. So the level of fire suppression that we're involved with, and you get, even when you go through CERT Basic, you're trained on, is very, very, very low level fires. And the idea is to knock down small fires, very quickly so they don't become big fires. Once they become big fires, then what you do is you're stepping back and making your decision making based on how big the fire is and which direction the wind is. Again, we're not firefighters, so we have no delusion about that.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I know Tom P. will stay over to answer or engage with you all, but we want to make sure we respect your time and officially end in a prompt manner.
So I'd like some input. Is this helping you get an idea about what you should be looking for as you walk down your block at night with your dog maybe, or your loved one as you're doing your walk or your run? Is this helping you get an idea of what an EAP could be and how you would set one up? Is this giving you at least a starting point for that concept? I'd like some feedback from the group, please.
We're getting some thumbs up.
Okay. One of the things that I have offered, certainly to our area coordinators, but we can certainly offer it to our neighborhoods. And even if you're in a neighborhood that is not in the 94027 zip code, what I can do is and I've done it for a number of neighborhoods so far, is I come out and I meet with a couple, three of you, we'll do the masks and social distancing thing, and we will walk around your neighborhood and we'll take a look at where would be the best location for an EAP, so that 2 or 3 or 4 of you in the neighborhood can have the same mindset, and then come up with a very rough plan on how you would set up. Now we have a setup, that's on the website on, where to put the tents, where to put the IC, where to put communications, where to put the medical unit, whatever. However, every neighborhood is different. For example, in Jeannie's neighborhood, their EAP would be in an area across the street, right, Jeannie?
Yeah, it's not associated with it's not in the front yard of any residence.
Right. In John Mosby's area, it's an island. There's a huge island. He lives on a court, but on the outside of a court is a huge island in the middle of the street that divides the street in two, and that's where their EAP is. In my block, the EAP will literally be halfway down my block, which is going to be 6 dwellings away from my house. And because that's where I've walked up and down the street and talked to my neighbors, and one of the neighbors said, sure, we could put it in front of my house. Now, and we don't have an EAP sign because nobody wants to put a sign on, on their property, because it's not in our block, that it isn't a easement. And that's okay. but we all in agreement that if something happens, we're all going to meet at Nancy's house. And that's where we're going to set up the EAP. And I've passed out little flyers and little outlines of, okay, here's where we probably want to put to get, our little IC area and our logistics area and our medical area. And here's how we want to do traffic control on the street, because it's not a long street, but long enough, that kind of thing. So I'd be more than happy, tpressing@gmail.com or A.D.A.P.President at gmail.com. Be more than happy to come out with 1, 2, or 3 of you or your neighborhood, and we do a walkabout and we design one. You could chalk, I'll bring chalk and we can chalk up the street and just kind of map it out so that then you can design your own response activity.
Thanks for that, Tom. Joan, I see you have a question. We'll get to that right after we adjourn the meeting. So thank you all. It's past 10:15. You can leave if you'd like. Otherwise, you can stay on for additional discussion. But we'll see you on June 5th, where we discuss summer hazards.
Okay, for those of you who are still sticking around, Joan, your question?
A couple of things. Menlo Fire Cert's website has all these really neat forms, which you can put on your clipboard, so you don't have to remember all this stuff. So a reporting form, and it has all these boxes and things you can check, and these Scribe forms, and it makes it a lot easier because you're going to forget some of this stuff. And Tom, could you refresh my memory? What's the politically correct word we're supposed to use on the triage tags instead of black?
We're using Omega.
Omega. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the clarification on that is that there's black tarp. So a lot of folks have a trouble with the word morgue, and a lot of folks then there's the issue of using the term black. So in terms of radio communications, we're using Omega to report deceased individuals in the field instead of saying I have a black tag in the field. A lot of folks are uncomfortable with the word morgue, so I call it black tarp, so I'm still using the word black. But we also have created, this is not so in the CERT realm of things, you have green, yellow, red, and black. Okay, black is deceased, red is immediate severe injury, delayed serious injury, and walking wounded. One of the things that in reading all these after action reports, is especially the situations that lasted longer than 3 days, is you have a situation, especially with crush victims, is that by the nature of crush that eventually they're going to be deceased because of the fact that you're not going to get help within 24 hours. And unless you get help within 24 hours on a crush victim, the likelihood of that individual dying is extremely high. So what do we do about those folks that we know that we can't do anything about? So we've created what's called the blue tarp. It's not part of FEMA, but it is our adaptation, excuse the pun again, of a real world condition. So we have an area where we respect those who have deceased. That's a protected area. We also have a protected area for those who are in the process of leaving us. It is the morgue and the blue tarp are away from, a little bit away from medical operations for disaster psychology reasons. And you are having someone there who is tending those folks, who's monitoring those folks, so that there is a level of compassion and understanding in assisting them to their God. So you can see we here in A.D.A.P.T have taken a look at real world conditions and even made some changes and upgrades to what is the traditional FEMA format. Anyone else?
I have a question about radio communications.
Sure.
Maybe I should remember this from my CERT training, but I'm assuming that all the teams have a radio. So if you have a lead standing outside a building, they have a radio. And then is there also a person who might be going inside a building who has a radio? So there's communications within the team and then communications with the communications lead.
Right. So what would happen is in a light search, so in a triage transport, there's one radio with the team. So the team leader has a radio, and then Although you could have in a triage team, you could have the leader and a radio operator, and then 2 medical folks and 2 helpers. You can decide that on your own. In a light search and rescue, where you have coordination, you may have 2 radios. However, you want to be very careful about splitting your team up. So you could have 2 radios, one for outside communication, inward and inward outward, and then from the leader to the communications unit. That's going to be decided. That's an excellent question, Rebecca. That's going to be decided at the beginning of the deployment. In other words, the operations leader plus the logistics leader are getting together saying, okay, do we want to have 2 radios with this team because they're actually going to go in, and you definitely want to have somebody on the outside because that's safety and security. And matter of fact, you probably want to have 2 people on the outside again, and then having 4 people go in, or you might augment it and have an 8-person team. It all depends on the situation. Triage transport teams only need 1 radio. Fire teams only need 1 radio. But you may need 2 radios, as you're accurately pointing out, because you have people going into a building. Now, do you go into a building? Generally speaking. Well, that's why we're looking at the fire district used to have a class on structure assessment, and so we're investigating that, and maybe would that become one of the modules that the MPFPD might provide us, which and provide the entire district for that matter. Remember that aftershocks, even though the building may be looking good, the aftershock can compromise it, and that makes light search and rescue a very, 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 very tricky business, which means that even before you go out, the logistics, the IC, the operations leader, plus the team leader that's going out are really thoroughly having conversation about what it is they're going to do, to what degree, how quickly do they have to do it, what happens when there's an aftershock, and when, unfortunately, if necessary, when do they pull back and realize that they can't accomplish the mission. Those things all happen. Now that's really high level stuff. I mean, that's what we're teaching in the advanced classes at the area coordinator class. But you have to be thinking about it even if you're just a participant on a team, and you're asking questions. Well, what about this and what about that? But again, that's pretty high level. But thank you, Rebecca. That was a most excellent question. But you're adapting. You're constantly adapting to, even though we have this little outline, you're making adjustments as you see fit. So for example, I'm saying you should always send out 3 people on a reconnaissance team. Always, always, always. There's a reason for it. But what if you don't have enough people? Then it's 2. And you never send out a reconnaissance team of 1 person. We all know that. Your CERT training says it's always got to be 2 folks. So what happens if you don't have enough folks to send out 2 people on a reconnaissance? Then you don't send out reconnaissance until you have 2 people, ideally 3. Firefighting should always be 3. There's a reason for that, because of the nature of the response. And light search and rescue should always, I'm going to say should always be 6. I suppose you get away with 4, but you want to have the safety and redundancy the same way with triage transport. But what if you don't? Well, then, see, this is why we're getting all this training, is so that you can think about this and make your own decision. Your decision is the right decision. Your field decision, because of the Good Samaritan laws and the DSW coverage and whatnot, gives you the ability, if you're doing it with consultation, which is even as a leader, you're always consulting with people and asking questions. If you're making the best decision based on the available information, you can then go home at night knowing that you did the absolute best for your community. So, ODA, observe, orient, decide, act, observe all over again, orient, decide, and act. And that's the key. That's why we're using the ODA formula out of the United States Air Force Academy.
Tom, I've got couple of questions about the food and water for shelter operations. At the beginning of CERT being taught in Menlo Park, there was a couple that had started ordering the blue barrels in bulk to get a good price. And I don't know whether anything's been done recently in terms of food supplies and water containers that's been put together so that it can be done in bulk and then provided to individual families. And when you were talking about shelter operations, the DRCs don't have food for shelter operations. So where would the food come from for shelter operations?
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to answer both questions. The answer is no, we do not. We do not have nor currently are we looking at purchasing bulk water containers, and then obviously having folks pay for them. Our recommendation is if you're going to get a 50-gallon drum, make sure it has a spigot at the bottom, because a lot of them don't. And so make sure if you're going to purchase one of those 50-gallon drums, get a spigot, because the use of the pump that they give you with those 50-gallon drums is not as efficient as you would like it to be. So have a spigot at the bottom so you can use gravity flow. I have a Polymart 150, which is just a big drum. It's 150 gallons. It's color coded so it matches the house. It's got, Polymart's out of Texas. It has two spigots, one in the middle and one at the bottom. And although I do have 4 50-gallon barrels, but they don't have the spigots on it. And that's why I know, I'm emptying those out and going to then, probably give them away or whatever, donate them to Goodwill or whatnot.
Yeah, when I got my 55-gallon drum that many years ago, it came with a siphon pump.
Yeah.
You pumped it by hand to set up the siphon, and then it worked from there.
So anyway, and then you're absolutely right. In the Atherton DRCs, we have enough food for a team of 5 people for 3 days and water, and that's for the EAP. That's for the EAP or the ICP around that DRC. In other words, it's not intended for the public. So you have to. So if you are going to go to an EAP, bring your food. If you happen to be one of the logistics leader or the shelter leader, you're asking people to bring food. And we had the conversation in our last session on the first 3 hours, is that what you do is you set up a big old barbecue. Okay, you empty your freezer, your refrigerators first, because they will last approximately no more than 24 hours, and no more than 24 hours if you don't open it up. Your freezers will last up to, depending on the freezer, can last up to 48 to 72 hours if you don't open it up too much. But what you do is you start depleting your resources out of your refrigerator first, your freezer second, then your canned goods, and then your the
MREs or
MREs next, and then your dried meals. The reason why you want to do the freeze-dried meals last is because they use up water, and you need water for hydration, you need water for sanitation, and you need water for medical. So those of you who are running an EAP and shelter, remember water is for hydration. Actually, it's hydration, medical, and then sanitation, and only lastly food. So you want to use all those other food resources that don't require you to use water to hydrate a freeze-dried meal. And so obviously, refrigerator first, freezer second. I would use up my MREs next, and then my canned goods, and then my freeze-dried, but that's just me. That's how I've got it set up, at least in my little setup here at the house. And so that's how I've got it set up. But yes, we do not have food. So that's where logistics becomes really, really important. That whole resource management piece of logistics is figuring out how to gather up food, gather up water, gather up blankets, gather up first aid kits for medical, canopies, lighting, various kinds of tarps, tents, that kind of thing.
Has anything been done in terms of water purification?
What do you mean, has anything been done?
Well, I mean, I don't think the DRCs have any water filters, right?
I think our DRCs have, I think we have one life straw water bottle in each one, plus we have the tablets. In ours, we have a life straw bottle and we have the purification tablets.
Okay.
I don't know about the fire district. I couldn't tell you about the fire district. But matter of fact, you're working with Jerry. So those are good questions to bring up to Jerry, because I know Jerry and you and let's see, Wally and I think Sindra. By the way, if anybody wants to join the logistics team, please do so, because we're making sure that we're helping individuals with their family caches, or you know, I call them ARCs, your family ARCs. And we're also making sure that all of our Atherton DRCs are uniform and are able to do what they're intended to do, which is, you know, our DRCs have things like generators and axes and shovels and stuff like that. And they're intended for limited use, small area activity. And that's why we're asking all of you to have your own backyard caches, either to camp out in the backyard in a disaster or bring with you to the EAP if your property is compromised. So thank you, by the way, Kurt, for joining our logistics team. We really appreciate it. Someone else.
So do we have any natural sources of water that run through Atherton? I know there's water that runs through paved over tunnels, but is there access to any? I know in the wintertime, sometimes the water is running, summertime things dry up, where a water pump purification could be used in an emergency?
You know, Kurt, not that I know of. That would be something we would have to ask Mr. Ovadia, Robert Ovadia, who is the Atherton Director of Public Works. I mean, the only water resource I know is Bear Gulch, but that's locked up. We don't have access to that. And I've been told that there are 2 underwater streams that go through Bear Gulch, just as there are 3 underground rivers that go through Stanford campus that I was aware of, because one of them actually went through the parking garage right next to Forsyth Hall. There's an underground river, but in terms of having any access to it, there's none that I know of. But that's an excellent question, you know. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the Midwest where you may have a stream that you could, you know, drop a pump into and start pumping water out of into a filtration unit and have an accessible source of water. We don't have that in Atherton. The river doesn't run through it, at least on the surface.
Yeah, everything's been paved over.
Yep.
There are people who do have wells, and aside from the lack of needing electricity to pump the water up, there are houses. The house that I grew up on had a well. So I know that there's probably a bunch of houses that have wells that might have to be, you know, hooked up to a generator, but they could supply water.
And the other thing,
even if it was a limited supply, if you were talking about needing water for you know, flushing toilets and doing stuff like that for sanitation, wouldn't all have to be drinking water.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do know that a lot of the well water in Atherton is very alkaline. So, but you know, that is, you know, it just means you have to run it through some kind of filtration system, so it can be drunk. You can use it for, you know, watering plants and whatnot. Matter of fact, over here on Sunnybrook, matter of fact, 3 of the homes have wells, but it's non-potable in the sense that it's too alkaline. So they just use it for their fruit trees. But again, that's a great idea, Dan. You know, investigate to see if in fact you have a potential for a well. I certainly don't know what the rules and regulations in Atherton are for drilling a well. But you would have to, again, that would be Mr. Robert Ovadia, who's in Public Works, and you'd start there to get those kinds of questions answered.
They haven't allowed wells since the 80s.
Okay, great. See, so you're more up to date than I am on that. So thank you.
Oh.
Those are good questions because this all pertains to, you know, how are you going to be independent in a disaster if you know that if you've got, you know, 11 apparatus for all the fire district, and you have all the neighborhoods in this district, which is East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and the 4 areas of San Mateo County, the 4 sections of San Mateo County and the unincorporated area. They're not going to be here for a while. So we have to be thinking about the realism of the realistic situation of at least 3 days and probably longer, and how you're going to take care of yourself, you know? So, you know, it's like in my case, I've done lots of calculations, and the 150 Polymart tank gives me all of the capability I need for 7+ days for the 4 members of my household, which include hydration, medical, sanitation, and food prep.
And how many family members?
4. It's 1 gallon per person per day. So 150 gallons is more than enough. And because I know that disaster response is a team, a we thing, not an individual thing, I have that 150 so that I can provide assistance to neighbors across the street, because I'm at the end of the block. So the neighbors across the street, the neighbors next to me on the street, and one down immediately, because we are going to be the ones who help all of us take care of it, and then going farther down the street. So you know, every time we have once a year, we have a block party, not last year, but before, in October. And I've been showing people, you know, pictures of my Polymart, pictures of the 50-gallon drums, or the 10-gallon containers that you can get that are stackable. And I've told them about the, what's it called? The Costco, you know, the Costco case. I call it the Costco 40, which is, you know, 40 bottles of water, which is 1 person for 1 week for all of your needs. So, or I guess it's the Costco 45 now. It used to be the Costco 35, which was perfect. It was, you know, 5 by 7, so it was 1 person for 1 week, and now it's a little bit larger for the same price and gives you some extra bottles. So if you don't want to have containers, then you use Costco cases. I just find it easier to have a 150 with 2 spigots. And the key is, those of you who are getting large containerization for water, you want the heaviest level plastic that's food grade, and it comes in different grades of plastic. You want the real thick, and make sure you have double spigots for the bigger units, 1 in the middle of the unit and 1 at the bottom, so you don't have to do the siphoning at the top, because it's not efficient, and those siphons break very easily.
Yeah, and you have to remember that it weighs 8.5 pounds per gallon. Yes.
So the thing is that for that Polymart 150, you have to make sure it's on. I made sure it's on a, you know, I made sure the area was level. I made sure the area was strong enough to handle 150 times 8, which is 1,200 pounds. So Robin McClish says that she gets 5-gallon containers delivered. So there are people who have the delivery service. I guess Black Mountain, is that what it's called? Black Arrow Mountain, whatever. I know that Stanford, we had Forsyth Hall, we got 15 5-gallon bottles of water every week. And we used it up, for hydration purposes. It was for all the drinking fountains and whatnot.
Just a comment on that, Tom. Ours
Yeah.
works really well because we always have so many on site, 8 to 10. And each month we put the old ones at the back. So we just always have fresh water. And to me, it was worth it to have fresh water and not have to deal with a big tank that I didn't have space for.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the taste of the bottled water. So for us, that was our solution rather than having to carry, 6 packs in and remember to rotate them and stuff, or 12 packs from Costco.
Right.
We don't have to remember to rotate. We just use the water.
And how many are you getting at in one delivery?
Right now we get usually 2 because we built it up over time. We used to get 3 or 4 until we built up our 8 or 10.
Okay. And that will be more than enough for 7 days for sure.
Right, because there's just 2 of us. So we always have at least 8.
Yeah. So if you have 8, which is 40, and you divide by 2, that's 20. Okay. So now you have 20 days worth of water for each of you. So that's more than enough to carry you through. And all you do is you just do some calculations like that, folks. It's 1 person, 1 gallon per person per day. Figure out how many gallons you need for 7 days, let's say, times the number of people. That is the water you should have on hand multiplied by 1.5. You always want to, it's the old engineering principle. Engineering principle is 1.2. I multiply it by 1.5, and that's how much water I have. I have significantly more water than that because I know I'm probably going to have to help my neighbors stay hydrated so that because I know it's not a Tom Pressing thing, it's going to be a that's going to keep our neighborhood together. So I'm always thinking about the aspect of this. As much as I try to educate the neighbors on my block about the potential, they keep saying, well, Tom, we haven't had an earthquake or we haven't had a major disaster. And they're right. I've been evacuated from my property twice because of accidents at SRI, but that hasn't happened we haven't had an accident at SRI in 20 years. Okay. And we haven't had an earthquake since Loma Prieta. So folks are getting lax. They said, well, the earthquakes are not going to happen in Atherton, East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park. They're going to happen everywhere else. And that's a psychology that sets in, and it's normal. It's normal. If something hasn't happened since 1986, then what's that, 34 years ago? We're well overdue. And because we're well overdue, I'm duly sensitized to that, making sure that if it does happen, I'm ready. And I'm thinking always about the entire block because I know that's how we are going to survive this.
Well, the damage here wasn't that severe in Loma Prieta. So people think, okay, if we have another earthquake, it'll be like the last one. Well, then it turns out that the epicenter is closer to where we are, and the damage increases exponentially.
And see, this is all the aspect of disaster psychology that is presented in the CERT program, although the disaster psychology there is, event oriented. But this is another aspect of disaster psychology. We haven't had an earthquake. The last earthquake, which was a biggie, a number of buildings in Stanford collapsed. A number of them caught fire, and my building was the only one undamaged in the entire campus because it was built that way. It was doubly redundant in every aspect, including its architecture. But Stanford, for example, I'll tell you a little funny factoid. 2 weeks before the Loma Prieta earthquake, Stanford had decided that since there hadn't been an earthquake in such a long while, they ended their self-insurance. So they were self-insured. They ended their self-insurance contract. So they had no insurance when Loma Prieta happened. And it was a big scandal that the insurance was not there. And 2 weeks before the earthquake, the insurance that Stanford would have had was no longer in place, just because the psychology was, well, there hasn't been an earthquake in quite a while. And if there is an earthquake, it's only going to be 4.5 point. And then when the Loma Prieta happened, because Stanford's got a lot of brick buildings, we had 6 building fires, and all of the brick buildings on campus were damaged. Forsyth wasn't, fortunately. So again, let's just cross our fingers that, you know, an earthquake doesn't happen for whatever reason. And adapters are prepared for the worst case scenario, and we hope for the best. That's why we're training the way we are. Like the drill we're going to have September 9th is the worst case scenario. When you participate in this drill, like we did the last one, we had 131 people. We had, you know, 30 and 40 casualties. We had 30 casualties that we had to attend to. We had in addition to a 15-person mass casualty event. We had fires. We had lost people. We had somebody who had overdosed on methamphetamines. We had all kinds of stuff so that you can handle the situation. Although it turned out that when I scribed the July 4th double earthquake in Southern California at, what was it called, Rockport? It's where China Basin Naval Air Station is. Anyway, I was fortunate to be able to listen to for 8 hours all of the radio traffic between their dispatch and their fire, police, and ambulance. And I scribed the whole thing, put it on an Excel spreadsheet. And I had to laugh because all of the stuff that was happening at that major earthquake, two 7.3s back to back, approximately 8 hours apart, were events that were happening. So our drills are very, very lifelike, but it is the worst case scenario. And it's a place to practice in a safe environment to make mistakes, then recover from them, because no one's going to die or get injured, so that your skill set is been exercised. So when the real thing happens, you're not going to be afraid to go out and respond because you've tested it. That's why our drills are so cool. I mean, I'm really proud of our Atherton drill. The last one was, I mean, you know, we had 2 neighborhoods plus Holbrook Palmer Park, plus the 15-person mass casualty, which was a bus car automobile accident. We had fires. I'm hoping this time that we can get the fire simulator from the fire district. They actually have a fire simulator where you use fire extinguishers with a laser pointer to put it out. So I'm looking to actually create a virtual fire in the park, which we can't do a live fire, obviously, but that's what my goal is. If there are no more questions, I'm going to call it a morning, and I want to thank everyone for participating. Those of you who stayed over to listen to the after party, so to speak, the after session. I want to thank all of you and all of your dedication to stick with us during the pandemic. It's obviously been difficult to do. Zoom meetings on one level allow us to get in contact maybe with more people, but on another level, it prevents us from doing the face-to-face interaction that I think is really necessary for what we do. But anyway, thank you all, and you have a beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Bye.